Hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. I suppose, full disclosure first. As I said way back when I covered, on two occasions, when I covered 5 minutes to midnight, 6 minutes to midnight, 6 minutes to midnight, and when I covered, Producer Wife, what was the other film? Dream Horse. I should say that my discussion of this film is not entirely objective, because this is again another film that was worked on by producer wife Helen. Therefore, obviously, there is a certain amount of bias, I suppose, I have in respect of having a direct link to the film's production, at least in a second degree sense. That being said, I do feel like I can still discuss it fairly objectively. And what's interesting about first of all, that this is not a film in the way that in the same capacity as most of the films that I've discussed, which of course are big theatrical releases, even if I've not watched them in a theatrical context. Bearing in mind there have been occasions when I've broken that, like with the Bo Burnham film, but this is as one would traditionally refer to, a TV movie, a BBC production called The Trick. And yes, so we're seeing an interesting trend at the minute, and obviously COVID has a certain impact on the industry, and for the last 2 years, obviously, there's been this conversation about how exactly the film and TV industry will be affected by the lockdowns, the restrictions, the tentative, uncertain nature of production, and of course the fact that filming can stop and start at any time based on what is happening in terms of infection rates and variants, and etc. And I've started to note a trend, at least in the last 2 years. And obviously, this might be COVID, or this might be purely coincidental, that we're seeing a huge rise in, I suppose, smaller, more contained dramas where, before there was this sense of ambition and scale. If you look at, your big TV series like your Doctor Who's and your Good Omens, there was that sense of, or His Dark Materials, where you have that sense of ambition and not just in the type of production, but also in, the sense of like international filming, and that's not unique or new, but there was this sense of, we have the capacity to be able to film in all of these exotic locations, so really let's push the boat out. Whereas we've seen a huge drawback from that, and consequently we are seeing a lot more localized, a lot more dramas that are focused more closer to home. So films like I've already forgot the name of it. Not the one that's 6 minutes to midnight, but Dream Horse. Or the thing I've noted is the increase in what you might refer to the 4-part drama. Because the 4-part drama is a curious thing, and because there is a sense, and as I've been watching a few 4-part dramas in the last year or two, I've noticed that there is that sense when you're watching them going, I've watched things like that recent Channel 4 Netflix production, Adult Material, or The Accident. And what you're noticing I'm noticing with the 4-part dramas is the sense that they're in a strange position where as I'm watching them and as they reach conclusion, I often sit and go, well, there were many plot lines and story arcs that are cut from them. That you think, well, you clearly had the intention of going in this direction with this certain subplot or this character, and yet, for some reason, this got cut. And often I think it's because a lot of the 4-part dramas are envisioned as 6-part dramas, and for whatever reason, we're now seeing an increase of, let's cut these back, let's make them 4 parts. But the trouble with the 4-part drama, if you sort of tot up the time of it, is that they are essentially films. Now, the pacing and the way they're edited and cut together, they're dramas. But if you put them together and watch them in sequence, and if there was a slight re-editing, there is that sense where some of them you think, this might have made a better film. And so you have something like The Trick, and you think, is this the next phase that we're going to see? That we're going to see a lot more TV movie style films. Of course, we'll see a lot more 4-part dramas, and and depending on how the COVID situation plays out in the next couple of years, that might become industry standard in terms of British production. But there's something like this, which frankly would only really work, I think, as a film that wouldn't have the longevity to be able to carry a multi-part drama story, maybe 2 parts perhaps, but no more than that. And so you have a film like The Trick, and The Trick, in essence, is a dramatic telling of the case of a British environmental scientist whose emails were hacked and leaked, which then led to questions about the validity of his data and the fact that there was certain information that he withheld or accusations of outright lies. And the drama then becomes about really his story, about, it's not really his story, I suppose. He is the focal point, but it's more about the conversation around him and the conversations about environmental science, about climate change, about the validity of data, about how easily scientific fact can now be sort of stripped away and taken down. But what the film elects to do, it really does feel like it's serving several purposes. And so you're seeing the fact that it's this big sort of political drama, and it's about the politics of science, something that we are very familiar with in 2021, and the idea that things that should be considered scientifically unchallengeable are now, being constantly questioned and turned over and prominently on sort of political lines rather than on sort of the scientific aspect. So it's a case, if we take something like coronavirus and the whole question of, has coronavirus become a political issue when it absolutely shouldn't be? And the idea of different parties and different governments saying it is, the validity of it is, based on what the politics of that particular party is, and that becomes a very troubling idea. And so you have that aspect where it becomes about, global warming and the sort of politics of global warming and the idea of data being manipulated depending on who it benefits. Then you have the more the PR aspect of the film, which is more about, the idea that this guy is a scientist. That's all he is. And the problem is that he understands things in quite complex data, but he has to present his argument and his case in a way that almost is sellable. And so you have these two PR guys, played by Jerome Flynn and George Mackay or George Mackey?
don't know.
Either or, George Mackey, George Mackay. Choose your pick. And of course they are essentially trying to boil down his argument and say what is the way to make this, not bogged down in data, not bogged down in sort of dense scientific understanding. What's the reality of it that people will understand? And so that you have that aspect of it. And then of course you have the personal drama element to it, where you see this, this man who has been attacked, who has been threatened, whose family have been threatened, lives have been threatened, and of course now that he is being discredited, the way that he is being taken down and humiliated by the public and by the press, and the effect it is having on him and his wife and his family. And all of these aspects are interesting. It's not that they aren't interesting. There is a conversation to be had about the politicization of science. There is a conversation to be had about the fact that PR companies need to sell and restructure data to make it appealing to the public. And there is that story of, in an age of hacking and online ridicule and attack, how this affects people on a personal level. And all those aspects are interesting. And yet the film as a whole, it's difficult because obviously the subject matter is quite dry. And the challenge that I was finding with the film is that it wanted to almost tease out what its subject matter was. And so it spends a long time inferring about what was uncovered in the hack, and inferring what exactly what the level of damage that this is having to environmental science, and yet takes its time to explain exactly what has been uncovered. Like we are well into the film, and so the problem is you have scenes where it is incredibly highly dramatized about police who are investigating this saying to each other this is as serious as a murder case. But the problem is it takes its time in explaining why that is. Now, the trouble is, I suppose, there is also a sense of, well, in 2021 we should have a greater knowledge of environmental science and global warming. But in terms of a narrative, in terms of assuming we don't as an audience, it means we're spending a long time being told how serious this is without fully understanding why. And then we reach a point in the film where eventually it does, and it is explained to us. But it teases that out over a very long stretch of the film. And because this is based on fact, on an actual event, you do get that sense that it sets things up that it cannot answer. So it presents, the idea of who hacked this guy. In reality, no one ever found out. There is almost, and I thought to begin with there was going to be a sense of, this person on the inside was involved in some capacity, but because that never happened in reality, that was just something that I read into it that never existed. But it is frustrating because you get to the end of the film and the point is that it's not really about the hack, and it's more about the the global warming aspect. But then at the same time it's not really even about the global warming, because as I say, it takes a long time to actually discuss global warming, and it becomes more about the consequences of the hack. And so ultimately it is a film about PR and about public trust, and I think that's quite a hard film to really engage with. And it's a shame because, like I say, there are aspects of it that are quite interesting, but I just felt a little dissatisfied by it, and it wasn't holding my attention because it was circling around things that I already knew with things that I didn't know, with things that just were never found uncovered. And so I don't feel like I've come out of this film with any greater knowledge than I went into the film. And I think, and I suppose the trouble there is it just sort of leaves me a little cold. But, if this is sort of the future of productions, and this is, as I said at the beginning, where the direction things are going, that we're either going to get a lot of 4-part dramas or these small films, I can see where these stories could form and how they could be interesting character pieces that are about multi-layer stories. I think back and I wonder whether this really charts back to something like Broadchurch, where that kind of story became popular, where it was about one thing, but it was actually about several. And obviously that was hugely successful and a really great series. But if that is sort of the type of stories we're going forward, you look at something like The Accident, which similarly had that same thing, which was about one thing, but it was more about the shockwaves of that. And if we're in a period now where, in terms of British storytelling, both in TV drama and TV film, where it's going to be about this kind of story, I can see the benefit of it. I just think it's going to be difficult, because I think the issue is retaining focus on your primary subject matter whilst also wanting to be this on a multi-layered, ensemble piece. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because it's all helped me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 250 videos, and follow me on Twitter, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.